all generalisations are dangerous, including this one, as the old adage goes. But it seems to me that we do now, and we always have, as a species, treated people we don't know as less than us, even expendable. I think it's a terrible, dangerous trait that we seem to demonstrate. And I would say that it's been the case for thousands of years. I think it's possibly been the case forever. I think it may well be part of the human condition, but that nonetheless, even though it's within us and endemic, that if we pay attention to it, I think we can perhaps ameliorate the consequences of what is human nature. The numbers keep going up, which is to say the population of planet Earth. I don't really know how they do it, those that do it, but we're told that we now number 8 billion. 8 billion individuals, all alive at the same time, which is quite extraordinary. And many of the powers that be, frankly, it would appear the dominant powers that be, say that's too many. There's too many of us on this blue marble hurtling through infinity. Too many passengers. And I think this prevailing attitude may be making us even more casual about a trimming of numbers. More and more people consciously or subconsciously or unconsciously are internalising the idea that the world will be a better place with fewer of us. And I have to say that inevitably, always, it's babies and children that are the most vulnerable and seem to be demonstrably the most expendable of all. Despite the fact that birth rates are falling, all over the developed world at least, it seems not to matter enough when children die. We just turn a blind eye and a deaf ear. And I would say it was ever thus. And when I was thinking about it, the casual disregard for the individual child, I was reminded. Years ago, I did a series called A History of Scotland. It was a big all singing, all dancing, bells and whistles number, and we told a lot of stories. You'll have heard of King Malcolm. He's King Malcolm III, if you want to put a number against him, but it's the Malcolm that killed Macbeth. I mean, obviously Shakespeare fictionalised it, obviously, but behind the mist of the fiction is the truth. And King Malcolm III ascended to the throne of Scotland in 1058. Right, so better part of a millennium ago. And his bloodline thereafter was called Canmore, which actually means big head. It's also gone down in history as the MacMalcolm, the sons of Malcolm, Mac Malcolm, and the MacMalcolm dynasty bloodline would rule Scotland until 1290. But the Scotland that Malcolm ruled, his kingdom, was not the territory that we would know as Scotland. It wasn't the same shape, it didn't extend over the same territory. And particularly in the west and north were descendants of Viking blood, Norse people. And they had colonised and congregated a sort of crescent-shaped territory in the north and west, and taking in the islands off the west of Scotland. And for those reasons and others, they were loyal first and foremost to each other, really. And then, if they bore any loyalty to any monarch, it was probably to the King of Norway, right, not to the King of Scots. So the King of Scots was to some extent a rival. Really, it was a rival rather than anyone to whom they felt any natural loyalty. And the territory of the Norse Viking descendants and their allies, it was often huge, and it stretched at times from Orkney in the archipelago in the north, in a wide swathe around the west, and south as far as the Isle of Man. Right, it's quite incredible. And this was at times, it was known as the Lordship of the Isles, Rianish Gal. Even kings, the kings of the Isles. And so imagine that, you've got a King of Scots, but right alongside him, he's got a serious threat in the form of a population that disregard him, don't think he should be where he is. And it was exacerbated by the fact that the Malcolm kings, the sons of Malcolm, were predatory and expansionist, and they were trying to gain more and more land. And in the face of that, the people of the Isles, the sons and daughters of characters like Somerled and the rest, they sided with anyone who would seek to oppose the King of Scots. And in the wildness and the wilderness of the far north, one of the rivals to the MacMalcolm line was the MacWilliams, the sons of William. And their claim, and it was less valid than that of the MacMalcolms, truth be told, but it had taken root during a period of uncertainty that followed the death of Malcolm III. It's quite complicated, but in essence you've just got two lines challenging one another for the throne of Scotland. And when the MacMalcolm kings kept pushing north, allies of the MacWilliams supported their fellow MacWilliams in pushing back. And at times the MacWilliams posed a serious threat, and they pushed south in their own right. And their success waxed and waned until in the 1220s, okay? So decades and then centuries start to pass, and sometimes they're on the make and sometimes they're put back in their box. But in the 1220s, they found the energy and the resolve for one last roll of the dice, and they rose again in open rebellion. And by this time, the MacMalcolm king was Alexander II, who was a serious figure. And in the face of the rising by the MacWilliams, he went north himself to lead the fight from the front. And the job was ruthlessly done. And it culminated, and here's where we get to the point in relation to children and babies, it culminated in a notorious horror show in the midwinter of 1230 in the town of Forfar, before an assembled crowd of locals, and with the king himself in attendance. One of his henchmen stepped out into the market square in Forfar with an infant in his arms, virtually a newborn baby, and the little girl was the daughter of the leader of the MacWilliams, and she was effectively the last of her line. And it's in the Lanarcost Chronicle. The daughter, who had not long left her mother's womb, innocent as she was put to death in the view of the marketplace. Her head was struck against the column and her brains dashed out. Right? This is the stuff of kings, you know, as well as the pomp and the ceremony and the crowns on the head and whatever. You know, this is the stuff of which kings have been capable. And I'm minded always of the film The Usual Suspects. And Verbal Kint, who's the narrator of the piece, he describes the nature of men of will. And he says they realised that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't. That's the root of power for those that seek power, is the ability, the willingness to demonstrate that you will do the unthinkable. So that horror of the snuffing out of the MacWilliam line with the snuffing out of the life of a newborn baby in front of a crowd, that was, you know, the better part of a millennium ago. And so it still is now, and so it would appear to be, it always will be. I don't have to elucidate or illustrate the horrors that are unfolding at the moment elsewhere in the world, but when you get right down to it, at the base of it is children dying and babies dying, and in an elemental sense, every baby belongs to every one of us. They're all our sons and daughters, because that which happens to anyone's son or daughter can and might eventually happen to all of our sons and daughters. So what's happening to any child is our business. If we really care about children, if we really care about each other, then how, I ask, can the terrible deaths of any children be resolved with the terrible deaths of even more children? Surely horror, piled on horror, only makes everything even worse and forever. Surely there can be no justification for killing children. anyone's children. And I would say as well, make no mistake, just as history remembers the terrible death of an infant all those centuries ago in Scotland, so history will remember all that's happening now. And we need to remember that this way in which the youngest of us and the most vulnerable and the most precious are treated like something expendable. We must pay attention to that aspect of human nature. And it's especially dangerous at the moment when we're told at the same time that there are too many of us. We're 8 billion. Sooner rather than later we might be 10 billion. And within that is a growing assumption that the individual is less and less significant. There's plenty of us. There's plenty of people, plenty of kids, plenty of babies. What's a few hundred lost here and there? That's the attitude that's out there. And unless and until we remember that every individual, every baby is of irreplaceable value, if we don't remember that and act on it, then the cycle of horror, piled upon horror, that has been the dark travelling companion, the shadowy travelling companion of the human species from the beginning, if we don't pay attention, then we will never break that cycle. And the children and the babies will continue to die.